I got up on a table in the middle of this room, and I stood on the table, and I announced that, hey, my name was Angie Klein, and my dad is Ralph Klein, and he asked me to come here, and he told me he was going to take me for lunch.
It's a conspiracy!
But then I'm quite tiny, and so afterwards, because I always wear heels on stage, I was a bit self-conscious. Like, I'm so teeny-weeny. Like, I'm only 4'11".
You're 4'11", so in heels
I'm 5'1".
There you go. Okay.
Maybe.
It's not about the height, though. It's about the personality.
I guess.
Yeah. We're going to do a little Alberta-centric episode on the history of one of Canada's most famous premiers. I would say absolutely, certainly Alberta's most famous premier that I can think of, and of course I'm talking about Ralph Klein, the longest-serving premier, maybe.
Oh, definitely.
Definitely, yeah. And amazing. When I first reached out to Angie, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to her was that his nickname was King Ralph, and I mean it honestly, that your family's like has this sense of royalty about it, like with the Alberta version, and I know that's kind of something you probably don't play up,
Oh no, they call me Princess Klein.
There you go. Okay, right, and that's partly due to the longevity, but that's partly also just that the love and the affection and the very, even people who didn't identify as conservative voting still had a real soft spot for your dad, and it's just. Yeah, it's a real honor to get to talk to you about this again.
Well, the honor is mine.
Oh, right on. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself here?
Well, I'm originally from Calgary. I transplanted myself here in Edmonton about 15 years ago, maybe 16 years ago, and I fell in love with the city. I can't imagine moving back to Cowtown, although when I do drive back, there's always that sense of home.
Yeah.
I'm a big supporter and part of the music community here.
You are.
And part of the arts community. And
you have a band here.
Yeah, I have a band called the Inclines.
Okay.
And I do some of my own original music with that band, and then via Angie Klein Music. You can find me on SoundCloud, and you find me performing at festivals around the city and around Alberta.
Yeah, well, I've got a single. Alberta Made was the.
Yeah, Made in Alberta. That actually was a typo on the thing, but it's okay. Whatever it is, it's Made in Alberta. Alberta Made. It's a good Alberta song, good, and it's got quite a few references as to my father and my family and my life.
That's incredible, and we're going to talk a little bit. You've had an extremely interesting life. I can't wait to get into this, and it was very, very cool. And just real quick, yesterday we'll include your social media links in the episode description. But yesterday we were at your flower shop, and just a quick plug about your flower shop because it was so cool. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've been a florist since I was very young. I won a wildflower ranging competition with the county fair when I was 12, picking ditchweeds, the big blue ribbon. And so you can honestly say that it's something that I was naturally attracted to. Got my first job in a flower shop at 16, and was worked in a flower shop ever since I was probably 20, managing. I've had my own business for the last 25 years. Yeah, and Petals on the Trail was on St. Albert Trail on 118th Avenue for 9 years, and then the landlord raised the rent, and so I moved, and now I'm on a bicycle trail at 127th Avenue and 127th Street.
No, that's very, very cool. So you've been a florist for about 25 years, and we were talking yesterday, that would be, I'm trying to think, that's like the late...
70s.
The late 90s, you would have got into being a florist?
Oh, no, that even before that. So
or owning your own business.
Owning my own business.
Yeah.
I was a florist long before that.
Okay.
I've really never been anything else. I think I worked at Chelachek once, and when they smoked still in the office, it was gross.
Oh, but you were in Calgary, and were you living? Ralph Klein became the mayor of Calgary. Was it 1986? I believe. Like that was kind of the entrance into politics.
Yeah. was in mid 30s. Yeah, I think it would be at 86. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember the logo on the
Right.
big black and white, really simple big black and white logo on the thing. Ralph 86. I think it was 86.
Ralph 86. That's incredible. So do you remember when he was running for mayor? And
well, I could probably never forget it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know he was running for mayor because at the time I was a footloose and fancy-free hippie. living in Jasper in a hippie commune, and I had finally gotten a job, and I was chambermaiding, and I called him up, and his birthday was November 1st, and I think the election was November 3rd or 8th or something like that. And I called him up. I said, Dad, I'm going to take you for lunch. I finally got some money, man. He says, no, don't come for lunch. Come for the election. I'm like, what? He says, no, I'm running for mayor. I said, no, give me a break. So I put my yellow backpack on with the frying pans on it and the hippie skirt that had the big clouds that said love, peace, and got my thumb out, and I got to Calgary, and I arrived at the headquarters there, and I was ignored, and I basically shunned and pretty much told, there's the door. Anytime you'd like to leave would be a good time.
Oh, people didn't know who you were.
They had no idea, but like just some street person off the street trying to annoy them, trying to get at Ralph, and finally I'd had enough. I said, so I stood literally. I got up on a table in the middle of this room, and I stood on the table, and I announced that, hey, my name was Angie Klein, and my dad is Ralph Klein, and he asked me to come here, and he told me he was going to take me for lunch. And all of a sudden, it was like all these hands, like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. And I get down, and Dad kind of looks at me, and because we have the highs and the hugs and whatever, and he says, "Do you have anything else to wear?" And I'm like, "Well, maybe," So he says, "Well, go get changed and come back, and I'll take you for lunch." And so. No offers of cabs or anything, he gave me bus fare, and away I went to Dover. And,
on the bus. Oh,
man. And, thankfully I had something in the closet still hanging at Mom's. And back I came on the bus, and that day I was the mayor's daughter.
That's amazing. We were, that is such a perfect example of, here's some bus fare. Because there clearly would have been someone, some yes man waiting.
Could have driven me.
Yeah, but...
I don't even think, probably his head wasn't there.
No.
So, but it was funny. It was fine, whatever.
So then, that was 1986. So then he would have been the mayor of Calgary during the Calgary Olympics.
Yes.
1988 one of the most famous Olympics that have ever been
the only profitable Olympics, Winter Olympics that I know of ever.
Not just the only profitable Canadian one, but the only profitable one ever. All of the Olympics, Nagano, everything.
All of the Winter Olympics. I don't know if any Summer Olympics have made any money, but
I think Los Angeles has profit.
Los Angeles. What year was Los Angeles?
That was summer though, 84.
84. Same. Oh, just the earlier. Right. Cool. We've got some people off mic here helping us out. Yeah. No, that's good. Was he directly involved with the Olympics at the time, or?
My father was a people person. Mm-hmm. He could connect people in ways that a lot of people don't or can't. He was very much directly, involved with OCO, and he went down and he delivered lots of speeches and proposals, and he was absolutely instrumental in getting the Olympics where they were. And I believe it was driven by his policies and his ideas about what we can afford to do and what we can't afford to do that made it a profitable Olympics.
Do you think that his experience with the Olympics not only boosted his public image, but do you think it was something that he's I could do this on the next level?
Of course. That's a worldwide arena.
It is.
You're no longer a small fish when
No.
you're playing with the Olympic Committee.
Put the city on the map internationally.
And himself. Being able to talk to people on an international level, you get a completely different view.
Yeah. Just the amount of people that you would meet, the globally influential people through the Olympics. You're going to meet royalty. You're going to meet sports figures. You're going to meet everybody. My world traveling hasn't been extensive, but anywhere I've been, you have a 20-30 minute conversation about Canada, and things like the Calgary Olympics pop up, and it's one of those things that is often part of it. That's just this huge. It could be things like the Cool Runnings movie, which is super popular, and that was one really great story about the whole thing, but also, like you said, the only profitable one. And I think it just put Canada on the map in a way that people were like, Calgary seems like a really cool
city.
Yeah. So what was he? And we'll get back to this again. But what was he before? Like, had he been in politics leading up to becoming the mayor?
No, he was a reporter. While my mom and dad were married, he went to journalism school, and he also took politics, civics.
Okay.
And he was always a reporter for CFCN. This has been Ralph Klein, CFCN News. I can remember it just like it was yesterday. I can see his face and hear his voice. But he covered City Hall.
Right.
And he just got so fed up. He's like, I can do better than these clowns. Like this is not working. And so he did.
Yeah. My dad was a journalist, and he often claimed that like once you've become a journalist, you kind of always are a journalist. Like it's always going to be part of your personality. Do you think that being a journalist like influenced him in some way? Like because he would have dealt I should put it this way. A lot of politicians these days have a very strenuous relationship with the press. And do you think that like he would have kind of spoken their language of the media?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you're, it's like being, anything, when you know it from the inside out,
that's right.
You have a different perspective, you know? So when he became a politician, being able to handle a scrum or being able to know what the kind of questions that they're going to ask him, he's already got an inside track on what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, so he was completely comfortable. I mean, but he was completely comfortable with everybody. It was just a natural way that he had, that it didn't matter if you were rich, poor, famous. He just basically handled everything in the same manner.
Right, like everybody's going to get the same treatment.
That's right.
You know, same roughness, same friendliness.
Yeah.
You know,
what you saw was what you get.
That is interesting. That is something that we try not to get into too many opinions, but I feel like that's something that's missing from politics right now. It's that there's a lot of catering to whatever.
It's missing in humanity right now.
Yeah, man. I do have to ask one question. So we were talking about this bus thing. On the podcast, we deal with a lot of like conspiracies and alternative accounts and myths and stuff like that. And there is one lingering, I don't want to say myth, just want to ask you about it. So there's this story that during the Olympics, your dad specifically rounded up a bunch of homeless people, put them on a series of buses and shipped them out to Vancouver. And I've been in Vancouver. Every time I've been in Vancouver, I've been like, oh, I'm from Alberta. And people are like, did you hear about the homeless people coming in during the Olympics? And I'm like, yeah, I've heard that story. So
yeah.
Have you heard of this before?
I've heard the story.
Okay.
Now, if you think about it, that's pretty expensive.
Very expensive.
You know, that's pretty expensive. First of all, trying to herd or gather that many people who are displaced is not easy to begin with. First of all, they're not very likely to get on the bus.
No, they're not. Yeah, not likely to move.
They're not likely to get on the bus.
Oh.
And why? Why would you? I mean, there's already thousands upon thousands of homeless and displaced people in the greater Vancouver area. Right. And I don't think that Vancouver would be too welcome to see these busloads of more people being unloaded on their doorstep. I think you would have heard a lot more from the Vancouver side of that story had that actually happened.
That was where the conspiracy popped in. It was like, oh, the people in Vancouver, they teamed up, and it's like...
Yeah, sure they did.
Yeah, so there's stories that the homeless population exploded after that. But every port city in the world, every single port city has a huge homeless population. Like,
Toronto as well.
Exactly.
You know, you go down there and you go to some of these beautiful neighborhoods and you have to step over a homeless person sleeping on a grate. It's everywhere.
Yeah. Vancouver is particularly bad.
Oh, it is.
I think blaming something in Alberta 30 years prior is...
Yeah, no, that had nothing to do with it. I mean, I was one of the homeless people in Vancouver
really?
At one time. Yes, I left home quite young, and I hitchhiked around and I panhandled on the street, and I played bust, and right. I lived in a really junky hotel, Marble Arch Hotel, that was so scary. I actually used to climb in the window rather than using the doors, and couldn't afford to pay rent, so I cleaned the bathrooms to stay there. So I was one step above homelessness, so it could happen to anybody.
That's something. So you would have been, when would that...
Oh, I was about 17. 17 or 18 years old. And I think when Dad became mayor, I was about 19.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask. Like, this would have been overlapping. So were people aware of this? Were they like, well, the mayor's
here's the
got a
backpacks, man. No, it was like when I arrived, Dad hadn't heard from me in probably 5 or 6 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, so there had been...
Like, I left home. It's like, dude, I'm out.
Oh, that's something else. Is this publicly known? Like, is this sort of a part of the story, or?
Well, it's not publicly known, but if you know me, you'd probably know the backstory.
Yeah, like if I was to, would this have come up in his campaign rallies? People like, well, what about this?
No, there'd be other things.
there'd be other things, and we'll touch on. There's a couple other things that we can, no, that is fast. That's super fascinating. So he was a reporter, became the mayor of Calgary, and then very interestingly stepped into the mayorship without previous political experience.
None.
And then stepped into the premier's office, basically.
Well, he went from the mayor to being the environment minister.
Okay.
And from that, he stepped into the premier's office. A lot of people don't know this, but before he was a PC, he was basically, had liberal tendencies.
That is shocking. Sorry,
yeah.
I need you to repeat that. So
My dad was a liberal.
Wow.
Yeah, and he said to me one day, he said, well, Angie, it doesn't matter what party you're in. If you're not in office, you can do no good.
That's right. Isn't that incredible? It's not a black and white thing.
No.
Like, it's very gray.
Very gray.
Yeah. Because it's no surprise, but your dad is touted as like, people right now, we're in the middle of a provincial election, and people are like, oh, we need Ralph back, we need back to this like rough approach and like blah blah blah. And I think it would shock people. It would just be like, no, not, especially right now with the Liberals, they just immediately associate federal leadership, and they're like, do you mean he would agree with that? It's like, no, that doesn't mean he would agree with that. That just means he's not exactly what you think.
That's right.
And yeah, man, that is fascinating. Oh, wow. Oh, little exclusive. That makes me happy. Right on. Cool. So he went from the environment minister for about like
it was, I think, one session or a couple sessions. He wasn't environment minister very long.
Right.
I think probably during one tenure of a premiership. I think by the time the next election came around, he was gung-ho to become our premier.
Do you feel like it was like watching it from the outside saying, I can do this better, or do you feel like he was kind of pushed in after like a successful...
I think he was gently guided with a cattle prod to go into that. Yeah, I think had he lived, he might be our prime minister, Yeah. He always told me no, he'd never run, but I think it's because he knew he was ill. I think he was basically, like, you can do this. We need you to do this.
Yeah, you can be the guy.
You're the guy.
And they could tell. So.
But he had with Rod Love, and he had a really, really good support group. Like, he had a really good support system from the time that he was the mayor on up.
Wow. And that would have been, so he would have become started running obviously a little earlier, but he became the 12th premier of Alberta in 1992, I think it was.
Sure.
Something.
I'm still bad with math.
No, math, numbers, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And running straight through until 1992 until 2006. And like
2006.
we said, yeah, the longest running premier. And during that premiership, there was a lot of incredible things that happened. But Alberta becoming debt free.
That was huge.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that talk about that. Like, did you have any, because people probably bring this up to you all the time.
Well, we need Ralph back unless you were a teacher or a nurse. And they're like, they still have, I still get some animosity there. And usually I'll say, oh, you must be a teacher. Or you're a nurse. Oh yeah, and 99.9% of the time I'm right. You can't fix everything,
right.
But you certainly can't. You can't keep giving something over top of everything else. So at some point, you've got to pare it down to bare bones and then find out what's missing.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's what he did by cutting everything. Okay, clearly this isn't working. So we got to give back here. We got to give back here. But you don't know what it is that you are lacking unless you take it all away, right? So instead of just giving ad hoc to this and that, he basically took it all down to bare bones and realized, okay, this can't function without this much more.
Right.
And this can't function without this much more. It's so much easier to add back to something that is to...
Like pull it back and add in. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. If anyone was... like full disclosure, my mom is a teacher, and like I was a kid in the 90s, and I remember seeing this from the other side of this, and it's not my opinion, but like what would you say to someone who was saying like those cuts were great and we were debt free, but like what about the issues with teaching, the issues with health? Like, would you have anything to say to them? Because obviously it wasn't your fault, but people are going to be like, oh, Angie, listen, I got to vent something to you, and you're like,
well, there is no magic bullet, and I'm not a politician, so I can't really speak to what should have gotten done.
Yeah.
Or what should be done. I can only look back on what did happen.
What did happen.
And what's happening now. I don't know that there's any quick fix to the situation that we're in now. We have a different population than we did back in the 80s.
Radically different.
You know, we have a different demographic. The bugs are getting worse. The natural disasters are getting worse. You know, there's no quick solution
That's
to
right.
any of this because it's not the same world.
Yeah, and it's easy for people especially in retrospect, who are experts, blah blah blah, to criticize and everything, but like when you're in the middle of something, you really have to get on top of it. Right now, for example, Calgary made another bid for the Olympics very recently. What would you think about that?
Well, I'm glad that we didn't. I'm glad it didn't happen.
Right.
First of all, Alberta doesn't have the money to host another party.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it takes a lot of money to throw a successful anything. Huge. And Olympics are huge. And while it would be great for Alberta to be able to host something like that, and for Calgary to do it again, now is not the right time.
Right. Yeah.
I think even putting a bid forward was kind of foolhardy, but
yeah.
C'est la vie. Hey, we're here.
Oh, and it's good, but you're right. Like it's a different era. So just saying like trying to capture something that was a magical experience in 1988. That in a lot of ways it wouldn't have happened again. It wouldn't have been the same. We don't have the same leadership. It's not the same time. It's different climate.
Well, Alberta had tons of money right then. Too.
Yeah.
You know, like we were, you know, basically in the heyday of the great oil spikes.
Yeah,
and
the booming energy sector.
Yeah. You know, and so there was money and there was excitement. Right now, there's people are having a hard time feeding their families.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not a good time for Alberta to be throwing money at a sporting event, and not that it's not important, because it is. You know, it is. But there's a time and place for everything.
That's right. There's been a lot of talk about and I know it's a bit of an obscure example to compare it to, but there are similarities. Nelson Mandela becoming the leader of South Africa, bringing in the World Rugby Cup. It wasn't just a sporting event. It was like a way of putting us back on the map, saying, look, we want to do this and bring in something with attention that's positive. And yeah, exactly. And it would be weird if they, you know, for example, tried to do it again, like the next time the World Rugby Cup came around. Like it wouldn't have been the same thing.
It's never the same.
Yeah. And so in that regard, yeah, I really have to agree with that. So the premiership went on. There's a very well documented. During the premiership itself, there was people that were like, you know, oh, this is great. He's telling it like it is, and what you see is what you get, and it doesn't matter if you're the Queen of England or like, you know, somebody from like Saskatchewan, some farmer guy. You're gonna get the same Ralph Klein. And I know this is a sensitive subject, but there was an incident. I want to say the early 2000s where basically the Ralph Klein, the Premier of Alberta, walked into an Edmonton homeless shelter and started like criticizing people that were in there, like throwing money at them. And so,
get a job.
Yeah, exactly. Get a job. I don't want to help you anymore. Here's some money. Just get out of my face. Stop. You know.
Yeah. Well, anybody that knows my dad's history knows that he liked his beer.
Right.
You know, and he was an opinionated human being, and so you put together a guy with too much beer and lots of opinion, and you can end up with a perfect storm, and you can do something very stupid. I think I think what he was doing didn't come from a place of malice.
Right.
He was always a very, I'll give you a hand up, not a handout kind of thing. And he was just frustrated I think frustrated that this was happening, and not really knowing how to do anything about it, and making some bad choices with what he did. But that being said, I think it came from a place where it's like, I'll meet you halfway. I don't want to keep giving out handouts. I'll give you a hand up. Yeah. And he was a pretty hard man to say no to. So I'm surprised that his because I'm sure he didn't drive himself there. So I'm surprised that his handlers or the spin doctors allowed that to happen. But it did, and he publicly apologized for it. And right after that, he quit drinking, and my dad didn't touch a drink after that.
That is amazing, and that is the part that I feel is unknown. Like, I'll be honest, the connection between enjoying a beer, like that was part of his image. It was like, he's the premier you can have a beer with, and good or bad. I mean, and those things get carried away, but the fact that he didn't drink after that is that speaks volumes.
Well, it speaks really a lot to his character, and and I was, I always, when Dad came over, I'd always go and buy some of that near beer, and I always have a near beer, because he never stopped liking the taste of it. He thought he was having a beer.
No, that makes me that's one of those things that one of the things that I get a little frustrated with is when people cite that as like we need one of these guys going in now and storming into these places and throwing money and yelling.
Nobody ever needed that. That was not necessary.
Yeah.
It happened. Was it a good thing? Probably not. Did it accomplish anything? Absolutely not. It did accomplish something. It made my dad stop drinking, and
that's huge.
And that was huge.
That's huge, and I know this is looking into things a little bit more personally, but knowing that his very cherished daughter that he must have just loved had spent time as a homeless person. Do you feel like that maybe in some part had colored his frustration with it?
For sure, probably. Like if. He came from a very modest background as well. We didn't come from a lot of money. He was raised in Tuxedo Park. His mom was a bit of a free spirit. His dad was a wrestler. They were divorced quite young. He was left to be raised by his aunt and uncle. Right. Under a very sort of military regimented family, and so he had a lot of ideas about how things should be done. Yeah. You got up in the morning, you made your bed, and you worked hard, and if you worked hard, good things would happen to you. Right. Like the meet you halfway. Here's your bus ticket. Go home and get changed. That's right. Even at that point, like if I ever wanted anything, he'd give me half. I had to have half. Mm-hmm. And so I think he ran the province and his life and his family very much like that. And so when he saw something, maybe that seemed to him like you weren't trying, it really frustrated him. Right. And homelessness is not that easy. It's not that they're not trying. It's not a matter of effort. And it's not a matter of effort. You and I know this, but do you feel like maybe he'd come up in a generation that wasn't? I don't want to say sensitive isn't the right word, but there's been a lot of we understand these things a bit better now. Well, homelessness wasn't. I mean, it was always an issue, but it wasn't until the late 70s, early 80s that it started to become really much more of a problem. Right. I think and it has direct correlation to do with population. The greater the population, the greater the homeless population. It's just one of those things, and it becomes you can't hide it anymore. There's no elephant in the room. The elephant is all around, jumping around in the park. It's unreal, and especially in a boom and bust environment, an economic environment that's like oil's huge and then oil's done and there's a recession. And it leaves people that are somewhat marginalized. There's a very small fine line between being somewhat marginalized and being homeless. This would have been almost around the same time as this shelter incident. There was the famous Ralph Bucks, which is great. I'll just let you explain it. Like I'm aware of it, and I remember getting it, but I'm like, this is so fascinating. This is something people have been listening to our podcast that are like from out of the country or whatever, and
I've mentioned this before, and people are like, "What are you talking? Like, was this special money?" And I'm like, "No." Like, and go ahead.
Well, the criteria for that is you had to be working.
Right.
You know, if you filed taxes, there was proof that you'd been working. Like if you could have been working and not filed taxes, you wouldn't have got it. But
Right.
if you were on the tax roll, you got $400. Didn't matter if you were 16 or if you were 95. It went to everybody. And as far as I know, everybody spent theirs. So all of that money, you know, all of these people in Alberta just got $400 to go and do whatever.
Yeah.
We did stuff. We built things. We bought stuff, and all that money went right back into the economy.
Of course it did.
Immediately.
Immediately. It would have been just you send it out, and like everybody gets a little boost of adrenaline, and then bam, it goes right back into the economy.
Yeah, which was you know, ingenious. Really.
I can't believe it happened. Like it's something that.
So the Alberta didn't lose anything by giving
No.
away. They gained in spades.
So just to clarify, every single person who filed taxes in Alberta of working age all the way into retirement got $400. So we're talking about millions of people.
I got it. I was like, woo!
Millions of people got $400 each. Do you know what the final number was?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It's got to be a huge number.
Huge. I mean, even it was just the population of Edmonton is about 1 million people.
Yeah.
That's 400 million roughly.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody would have gotten it, but like approximately. And that's just Edmonton. You've still got like, you know, a bunch of other big cities with big populations. So, that's a lot of money. A lot of critics would have been like, you know, we could have built a new school with this money. We could have built a new cancer center. We could have given every school a smart board in the classroom, something like that. What would you say to someone who would have a criticism of it in that regard?
Sure, we could have. That's it.
Yeah, basically, right? Like, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it could have been done differently, but it wasn't.
It wasn't.
Yeah. No, that's a good way of looking at it. I keep checking out the microphone. I'm like, are we still recording? Oh,
yes, it's all.
Cool. So that would have been outside of those things. Is there anything that you feel really marked his premiership that people should be aware of that maybe isn't like, oh, what about the time he blah 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 and the blah blah blah? Like there's the debt, there's the Ralph bucks, there's this thing with the shelter, there's like, you know, the attachment to the Olympics. Is there anything in there that you feel is like?
I think the train in Calgary, him bringing, you know, having quite a bit to do with bringing LRT to Calgary and bringing us into the 20th century when it comes to transportation and privatizing liquor stores. I think that was a huge thing. I mean, I remember standing in line, you know, on a long weekend for 3 hours trying to get a beer before the liquor store closed, and you couldn't get a beer for 4 days.
Yeah.
You know, so there was that. There was a ton of really big things that happened during his tenure as premier. Some you know, people would say that weren't so great, but he had just he put a lot of policies in place that we're still using now that are working. That's
Totally gonna fly. Yeah, it's weird when you go to another province and it's like, you know, oh, it's Sunday, the liquor stores are closed, or you know, you have to go to the beer store and you have to be there before 9, and you can't you just gotta order whatever they have, and it's like, what?
What?
What are you talking about? Like, that's just something that, and as you know, as a working musician, you're like, your hours are weird. So sometimes you're like, well, I'm going home at 1 a.m. I'm gonna grab a couple beers on the way home or whatever. You can do that in Alberta. You can't.
You can't do 10 o'clock, and you know, it's like 10 o'clock, that's it, you're done. You better plan that, boy.
Oh, yeah. I've never known differently.
Yeah.
But
well, I can tell you.
Yeah. Cool. So he would have been 14 years, and it ended up being 2006, 14 years to the day that the Progressive Conservative Party chose a new leader.
Yeah, you know, and he only had about 6 months left of his election, or of his term left, and they unceremoniously sort of just shoved him to the side with a no confidence vote. My dad wasn't well, and so he was sort of losing his faculties, and I think instead of letting him serve out his last 6 months with grace. They kicked him to the curb, which I really thought was poor taste. And, but c'est la vie. I'm not a party leader.
No, but that's out of everything that he would have given. 14 years as premier. What is 6
months?
6 months, even if it's just ornamental. Like
that's right. You're just a figurehead.
Yeah.
But hey, it was it was one of the things that it still is one of the things that I really disliked about the PC party, and they're not a party anymore, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, they're not a party anymore.
No.
It's incredible. Like it was marked by you had Ralph Klein finished in 2006, and then after that there was a string of
bad things,
kind of issues. Yeah. And not to get super political opinions, but like there was some leaders that were like, you don't deserve this position. Like you work for the people, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And there was a real difference. It felt an attitude that.
Well, there was an entire with Redford and Stelmach. I mean, Stelmach is a very nice man and a lovely human being, and his heart was absolutely in the right place. But he was, nothing really happened under his.
Right.
Under his leadership, and then we had Vince Redford, which was it just seemed to get more sense of entitlement as the leaders went on. It's like, okay, this is not working out for us. And then our last elected or not elected candidate ended up not even taking his seat to do something, and he said, "No, I'm sorry if I can't be the big fish. I'm taking my marbles and going home."
It was
I was just stunned and amazed.
But it was the end of an era.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. Like, I'm not exactly sure what the record is, but Alberta had basically a political monopoly for 44 years. I want to say
that's a dynasty.
Yeah, that's a dynasty. That's right. Where it's like you've got the Progressive Conservative Party in power without change. Majority got close a couple times, but like there was nothing else. And then that eventually led to what some people feel is a very radical shift.
Well, there was a radical shift,
and it was. But I mean, it had been this one way for so long. And when people are like, if it changed at all, people were just up in arms about it. And right or wrong, right or left, whatever, it got to that point after your dad was finished that things were just like, this is not the same party. This is not. No. And then that's what's going to happen. Like eventually something had to come along and kind of finish that off. Yeah.
Well, Prentice did a really good job of that.
Yeah. Oh man. So anyways, in Alberta now we've had the NDP, and good or bad, it's the premier has been Rachel Notley, who her father was Grant Notley, and there's a bit of a classic. Well, certainly in Canada, at the municipal and provincial and federal level, where you've got a parent who's a political, influential person or an affluent family, and their children successfully, and this goes right to Stephen Harper, everybody. Did your dad come from politics? Did you have a grandfather? Or
nobody. No, my grandfather was a wrestler, and he was a contractor, and my uncle who raised him was a fireman.
Yeah. So this really is like a unique.
It's uniquely human.
It's uniquely human. Yeah. Yeah. That's
everybody has everybody and anybody has an innate ability inside them to do whatever they choose. They just have to put themselves to do that.
Yeah. Oh. So you probably get asked this all the time. Have you ever considered entering politics yourself?
Yeah. No.
No.
That's a hard no. I swear like a trucker. I'm far too opinionated. I'm hot-headed. I would be a terrible politician.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have like a similar temperament as your dad?
Oh yes. Apple didn't fall far from the tree. Yeah.
So okay, fair enough. That's hilarious. In terms of like what's going on right now, people right now, man, it gets ugly online. It does. Real ugly.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I picked up my friend that was helping me with the podcast here, and someone had taken the sign from the front yard and like ripped it up and ripped all the signs up on the street. And it's like, I don't see what that's going to help.
It
and
doesn't help.
It's
if anything, it's like what is that? There's no such thing as bad press.
Yeah.
So when you see these idiots doing stuff like this, these very very not nice acts.
Yeah.
All it is drawing attention to the party that he's trying to
Exactly.
So it's like, why don't you just stop?
Yeah, you just there's a place for democracy. There's a place for civil discussion, and yeah, ripping out the party
That's
signs.
not civil
No,
disobedience. That's
terrible.
just vandalism.
Oh, it's brutal. But what would you say to anyone who's like, oh, we need Ralph Klein back, and he's the guy that's going to save us, and blah blah blah? Like, is there anything that you would say to someone who would like that would be like, that's the guy we need right now?
Well, if there was another guy out there like Ralph Klein,
right,
I would be voting for that. I'd be out there, pounding the pavement and sticking line signs in. But there isn't. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, as for choice, there isn't a lot of great choices in the candidates that are out there. I don't believe that any of them have exactly what it takes to put this province back on its feet.
Right.
And that's nothing against our current premier. It's just that I'd love to see something out there that just is like the answer.
Yeah.
But I don't see it.
And that probably never has ever happened, where it's like, oh, this is the clear answer.
This is the clear answer.
Yeah, like that's a very, that's a unicorn thing you're looking for. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're like, oh, I'm on board with, these guys.
If you would say where I sit politically, I'm like so dead in the middle. It's like, I believe there are great things on the left and there are great things on the right. And if we could only find some way to make both of those things happen, that should be the party that we should make, the middle party. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we're never going to. Nobody's all going to agree on everything. The person who wants to have all the social programs, is never going to be the person that wants to have the right for the right for life, right?
Right.
These two people are never going to have the same ideology.
Yeah.
They're never going to say, this is what we want. But I'd like for it to be, in a perfect world, we would be able to all get along and find a solution that suits both.
That suits everybody. Isn't it funny? See, we're talking about a provincial election in Alberta, but you could be discussing any election anywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, it's
the same. Yeah. It's as long as we've got polarized parties, that's what we have. We have in the United States, we have the Democrats and so it doesn't matter where you are. There's always one side and the other side.
Yeah. And
one side I'm right. And the other side is I'm right. That's the way it goes in wars. That's the way it goes in anything. In an argument, you're right, I'm right. No, can't. Sometimes we just agree to disagree, which doesn't get a lot done. It'd be better if we could all work together and find a solution that could work for everyone. But that's a perfect world.
And I think you and I have talked about this a little bit online, where there's always room for respect and and intelligence and civility, and everyone is so divisive right now, and it's like we don't need to be like.
Well, social media is particularly bad.
Yeah. We got to your store, and I know this is a private message you got, but we were coming into your store, and you were this guy, and someone had
trolls. What was NDP trolls? Yeah.
Well, what you and your NDP trolls can all just blah blah blah.
I'm like, well, they're not mine for one, and I'm far from a troll for sure.
No, absolutely. And I just think it's so funny that someone would accuse the daughter of Ralph Klein as being an NDP troll. Like that it just kills me. I don't know what's so funny about that. But
so I believe what I believe.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm going to leave it.
That's very cool. So at the end here, just to wrap things up, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for letting me come to your home.
Well, wait till you get your pancakes.
Oh, I forgot about pancakes. I can't wait.
Well, thank you, Andrew.
This has been really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, you know what? We're here for a good time, not a long time.
Yeah.
Heaven's got a hell of a political party up there.
Left home at 16.
love.